I think I understand your evidence correctly, but just to make sure I do, is it correct then to say that you not, when you indicated to this commission that cancellation of the contracts will be a threat to the economy, you're surely not advocating that the question of corruption should not be investigated and the proper steps taken as per the mandate of the commission, not so?
Chairperson, Commissioners, I can confirm that position. I think it's necessary to separate the two. The cancellation of contracts would be a very grievous step that would call into question the ability of any party to contract with a democratic South Africa.
But clearly that's irrelevant to the question whether the corruption should be investigated and the proper steps taken against whomever the people were involved.
Indeed, that's why I'm saying separate out these issues, because I don't think that anybody can stand up and support corrupt activity or that corrupt activities be swept under the carpet.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel. Commissioners, that's the cross-examination on behalf of Lawyers for Human Rights and my clients. I just want to ask permission to raise the question of the documents again. Advocate Mdumbi explained to this commission that the documents have been, certain of the documents requested have been given through witness statements and bundles to my clients. I just want to point out that the problem that we've had, and that's perhaps why I made the remark about the books, is that's one thing to receive those documents or some of the documents that you've requested the night before or the day before the witness is to testify. And it's another thing to receive them a month before the time so that you can properly prepare. And that has been the complaint all along. Not necessarily that documents have been, that there's been a lack of documents given to us. Yes, there are documents we still need and that we will give the list to this commission too. But the real complaint is about the timing. And all we're asking for and will ask for when we present the commission with our list as requested by the commission is that the documents be given to us timeously so that we can prepare properly and also then assist this commission in not wasting time. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Two issues advocated first. Am I right to say that at this point you are not complaining that there is a document, a particular document that you require that would have assisted you to cross-examine Mr. Manuel?
Not a particular document. I would have liked to have the minutes of the cabinet meeting. I think it was in November 1998, in which the final bidders were approved, but that document hasn't been around here, and I understand it's not available. We've been looking for, asking for that document. It hasn't seen the light of day during the cross-examination and or the presenting of evidence here. But except for that document, there's no specific document that I can say that I needed now to cross-examine Mr. Manuel.
Is there any specific issue that you want in those minutes in order to enable you to cross-examine Mr. Manuel? In those minutes that you are referring to?
I wouldn't know unless I see the minutes, Chair.
I'm waiting for this what I don't understand. You complain that you're unable to cross-examine effectively because you don't have a particular document. When in actual fact you don't even know what is in that document. That I find a bit strange. Secondly, can we get a list by the end of the day today from your clients of documents that they allege that are still awaiting from the Commission?
Chair, I have taken instructions on that point. My clients will prepare a list. They will not be able to have it ready by the end of today. They have been preparing a list to submit to this Commission and the Secretariat over the last few days in any event, and they're going to need another day or two to do so. My instructions are they will be able to present the list by the beginning of next week.
Yeah, I also find that a bit strange because they say that for the past 12 months they've been asking for documents and they're still waiting for them. One would expect that they know exactly what documents they're waiting for from the Commission. But then if they're still going to investigate which documents they require from the Commission, I find that a bit strange. In any event, if we can get their list by Monday, Tuesday, we'll really appreciate that because we want to avoid this statement that is being consistently made by the Lawyers for Human Rights that we are unable to cross-examine because we don't have documents. When in actual fact, they don't tell us which documents are those.
May I just respond, Chair, to the issue of the fact that you find it strange that the list is not available. It's precisely because the documents have been given to the Lawyers for Human Rights in drips and drabs through evidence by witnesses that we can't give a precise list. We have a list of documents we want. So every time a witness gives evidence, we have to tick off from our list which documents we have now received. We have received bundles this week of documents, and we've received bundles last week of documents which will now be correlated with the list that we're requesting. So it's not a question of us not knowing what we want. We know exactly what we want. We just have to do the sums, and then we will present the Commission with the list.
Advocate Defoe, I think it's very simple. If it's all right, and I wanted 10 documents, as and when they come in, if I tick, I should know by now how many documents are still outstanding. But then, maybe let's not get to this point any further. Let me have a list, at least by the latest by Tuesday next week, so that we can deal with that issue. Because we're trying to avoid a situation where each and every witness after he testified, it has been said that we don't have enough documents, we're unable to proceed. Then, secondly, and then two, we normally give you those documents with the statements that we receive from the various witnesses, because that will be the time at which we receive those documents. Some of them will be having them, and some of them will not be having them. So we cannot give them to you in advance if we don't have them. If it's all they haven't been declassified, we cannot give them to you until they are declassified. Every now and then when witnesses come and want to use particular documents, we go out of our way to try and get those documents declassified, and immediately thereafter then we make them available to you. And for your own information, more often than not, even we as a commissioner, we get the documents almost at the same time as your clients until I receive them. So I don't think there's anything strange about those arrangements, because we can't give them what we don't have. We can only give them what is in our possession.
Chair, I appreciate that, and I don't think the intention was to say that there's any kind of deliberate withholding of documents. I think it's more a question of doing the homework. But I appreciate what the Chair has said, and we accept that.
Chair, may I just, for the record, also confirm that the extract of the Cabinet meeting of 18 November 1998 was in the bundle of Minister Castro's.
So you're saying the minutes that they say they don't have, in actual fact, they have them in the bundle of Mr. Castro's documents?
Yeah, the extract of the minute is in there. Thanks, Chair.
They are, in any event, going, let the Lawyers for Human Rights compile a list. Let's have that list by end of business on Tuesday so that we can put this matter to rest.
Yes, no, that will be done.
Thank you. Mr. Crawford Brown.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mr. Manuel, during 1996 until 2008, you were the Minister of Finance. Is that correct? Thank you. And prior to 1996, you were Minister of Trade and Industry, and during the 1980s, you were one of the leaders of the United Democratic Front in Cape Town. You've known me since the 1980s when, as a former international banker with Nedbank, I was working with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Dr. Alan Bussack on the International Banking Sanctions Campaign against the apartheid system.
Mr. Brown, if you don't mind, can we confine ourselves to the evidence that this witness gave? He hasn't spoken anything about his involvement.
It's purely an introductory statement, sir.
Let's just get straight to the question. Get straight to the question that you want Mr. Manuel to answer.
Mr. Manuel,
Just hold on.
In that connection, I wish to place on record that we have been furnished with a list of questions that Mr. Crawford Brown intends to ask. In that list, there are certain statements which are made, which are defamatory. Some of them are scandalous and scurrilous, and obviously are not intended to assist this commission in arriving at the decisions that it has to. We would just like to place Mr. Crawford Brown on notice that we are certainly going to object to any of those questions as I've described. And a great deal of the intended questions deal with matters that are res judicata, and it appears that Mr. Crawford Brown intends to resuscitate the failed litigation in the Western Cape, and we shall certainly strenuously object to that attempt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, may I voice an objection that document was made available to Mr. Manuel's legal counsel? I was asked to provide a draft of what I intended to ask him about a week ago when I was here. Obviously, since then, I have significantly rewritten those questions. And I believe I can say that I have not been defamatory of Mr. Manuel with the questions I am now proceeding to ask him.
Can you repeat? I'm not quite sure if I follow what you're saying.
So I provided a draft of questions last week when I was here. I provided a draft of questions that I intended to ask Mr. Manuel. It seems rather extraordinary that that draft, which was provided to the Commission, has found its way to Mr. Manuel's legal counsel.
Who did you provide the draft, and what was the purpose thereof?
The draft was provided to Advocate Mdumbi at a request, and that I was required to certify why I should be invited back to cross-examine Mr. Manuel and Mr. Mbeki.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but in any event, I don't think there's anything wrong in Mr. Manuel being made aware of the type of questions that he needs to prepare on.
So may I proceed, sir?
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Manuel, your responsibility as Minister of Finance.
Just hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Manuel, as Minister of Finance, your responsibility as a member of the Cabinet Subcommittee for the arms deal was firstly the affordability of the acquisitions and secondly the financing arrangements. Is that correct?
That was the subject of my testimony yesterday, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. Now, given post-apartheid South Africa's socio-economic priorities, you were known during the early stages to be opposed to the arms deal acquisitions, and the memorandum of the Department of Finance memorandum dated the 30th of June 1998, which is entitled Availability of Funding for Procurement of Defence Equipment, was jointly signed by yourself, Trevor Manuel, as Minister of Finance, with Ms. Maria Ramos as Director General of Finance. And the document is paginated as pages 371 to 374 in the bundle number 2, which has been provided to you.
I haven't had a question, Commissioner.
Okay. On page 373, just above your signature, it states, quote, "The Department of Finance has performed a fiscal analysis to estimate the level of funds that will be available over the next 20 years for spending on the proposed government-to-government contracts. The Department of Finance strongly recommends that the total sum of any contract signed should not exceed the amount that has been estimated as affordable as indicated in Table 1, unquote. Is that correct, and is that your signature?"
There is a document before us, Chairperson. Thank you.
Can we go on with the next question, Mr. Brown?
So you confirm that. Okay, thank you. Table 1 at the bottom of page 372 projects affordable defence procurements in the year 2001 and 2002 at 1.4 billion rand, rising to 4.5 billion rand by the year 2018 to 2019. Is that correct?
Mr. Brown, we can see the document here.
Thank you.
It's not necessary to go through each and every item on that document, unless if there's a specific question that you want to ask.
Okay, I will skip over the part that, since Lawyers for Human Rights have already raised the issue of the authority given from Parliament in the Defence Review, I'll then move on. That that even at 6 billion rand, option 2, which was what IDASA described as little more than approval of a wish list, had greatly already exceeded what Treasury deemed affordable in terms of this memorandum which you signed. Is that correct?
Chairperson, I don't know if I'm being asked to confirm what IDASA said, because I cannot reasonably be expected to do so. Thank you.
Sir, there was no authority from Parliament for the arms deal acquisitions as such. There was a wish list that assumed over a period, there would, in terms of option 2, over a wish list, and that there would require further parliamentary approval, that there would be expenditure of about 6 billion rand, 6 billion 14 million rand. Even that exceeded the figure that your department, over your signature, had deemed to be affordable. That is what I want you to confirm.
You know, Commissioners, there's a certain rationality to the protection, or the PIA, Access to Information Act, and that is that documents that are being developed cannot have the same weight as formal decisions taken. An intra-departmental submission is theoretically protected by the PIA, so why are we going there? My testimony yesterday, Commissioners, covered what has been spent, and I was able to demonstrate, as had Mr. Donaldson before me, why it was entirely affordable within the fiscal envelope. Thank you.
The Cabinet's approval in 1998, I would put to you, of 29.8 billion rand completely blew the budget of what the Department of Finance had deemed to be affordable less than 5 months earlier on June the 30th, which appears above your signature. And within 2 months of that, the figure was already 30.3 billion rand, and by February 2001, the figure was already 43.8 billion rand. The reason is that even these figures had been massaged to deceive the public by excluding 9 BA Gripen fighter aircraft as a so-called option, maritime helicopters, and sundry other expenses. Is that correct?
Chair, one must object to gratuitous statements like that. The figures have been massaged. Where is the evidence?
Mr. Cooper-Brown, on what basis do you rely for the allegation that the figures have been massaged?
We traversed that at great length in the cross-examination of Mr. Casrals the other day.
Mr. Cooper-Brown, on what facts do you rely to make this statement that the figures have been massaged?
So there was a discussion at great length in the cross-examination of Mr. Casrals about the memo and whether the public would be, that the figure of 6 billion rand should not be made available to the public because it would create a public outcry. That discussion with that cross-examination.
That I understand, but then when was the statement? What facts are you relying on to say that the figures have been massaged, and by whom?
Because in the figure that that was published to the Parliament, to the public in 98, it excluded the subsequent Gripens fighter aircraft as what was a so-called option 2, which then, as we learned subsequently, the front-end loading costs of that option were such it became practically impossible to apply that as an option. In fact, we were caught into this, and this is why the prices escalated so radically to 43 billion rand.
Thank you. I'm not allowing the question. Get to the next question.
So the affordability study committed by the Department of Finance officials with assistance from international consultants warned cabinet ministers in August 1999 that the arms deal was a risky proposition that could lead the government into mounting economic, fiscal and financial difficulties. And as you pointed out in your submission, the affordability study was acknowledged by the Auditor General and others as being a highly professional document that warned the cabinet minister of the risks involved. The Chairperson, the copy of the affordability contained in the bundle from Mr. Casrals is not very legible. Nonetheless, Mr. Manuel will obviously be familiar with the document and the warnings it contained. May I proceed specifically with a warning by Warburg Dillon Reid on the foreign exchange risks?
Mr. Crawford-Brown, can you please put questions to the witness about his evidence without reading a very long statement? Yeah, it's a very long quotation. I'm sure it's going to take a lot of time even before you come to the point. Ask Mr. Manuel, you heard what his evidence was in chief. You heard what his evidence was when he was cross-examined. Ask him anything about what he knows and what should be within his personal knowledge. What about what other people have said?
So Warburg Dillon Reid specifically said there's no effective way which government can successfully hedge against currency risk. Is that so?
Chairperson, if indeed Mr. Crawford-Brown were an international banker, he would know how these things work. He would know that you ask for mathematics to inform you of risks. That's what we did in inviting Warburg Dillon Reid and paying them to do it for us. We did it because we wanted to understand what the risks were. And as I indicated yesterday, once you know the risks, you know how to mitigate them. If you don't know how these things work, you might be shocked to abstract a line from what a company like Warburg Dillon Reed's would offer you. We weren't shocked. We evaluated and we took appropriate decision, and I think the record speaks. And the record, I think, is a history of sound fiscal management over the period. All of this is annually reported to Parliament. In fact, in terms of Section 32 of the Public Finance Management Act, there are monthly reports to Parliament. So these are matters of public record, Commissioners. But I want to emphasize that we understood the risks and mitigated against them. Thank you.
Commissioner, in fact, the rand since 1999 has collapsed by 68% against the US dollar, from 6.25 to 10.75, and by 79% against the euro, from 8.12 to 14 rand 50 per euro, and in the course of the arms deal to date. Again, as I say, Warburg Dillon Reed warned you that there's no effective way. This is a 20-year contract that you went into when there is no effective way to hedge against currency risk. It was reckless, and that's the point I'm putting to you.
Chairperson, again I say, if indeed the questioner were an international banker, he would understand currency volatility has nothing to do with a contract in a particular country. The most volatile interrelationship in global exchange rates is that between the US dollar, the euro, and the Japanese yen. It's got nothing to do with the issues we're talking about. This week, there's been confirmation of the fact that the Ghanaian currency is in the process of collapse. It has nothing to do with the contract before us or the reason why this commission was established. I submit respectfully, sir. Thank you.
In terms of Section 216 of the Constitution regarding Treasury control, Treasury is obliged to ensure transparency and expenditure control in each sphere of government by introducing a generally recognized accounting practice. It is not generally accepted accounting practice to borrow for 20 years when there is no means of hedging against that risk. Therefore, you were in violation of Section 216 of the Constitution regarding accounting practices.
Mr. Mayor, do you agree with the statement or not?
Chairperson, this very issue was the subject of the application by Mr. Crawford Brown and ECHA against us. We agreed yesterday it's res judicata, and I plead that the Commission recognizes that. Thank you.
Thank you. That issue has been properly dealt with by court of law. I'm not going to allow it. Get to the next question.
Sir, since Mr. Manuel has raised the case of the matter that I brought against him in 2001, I think it is only a matter of that I have a right of reply to the allegations that he contained in that. It's simply a matter of fair judicial practice that I have a right to reply.
The court has made a decision about that matter. You were given a chance to reply, and from there the court gave a decision. I'm not going to allow you to raise that matter again here.
The point I want to make is the use of perjury and of a deliberate obstruction of justice which overrules that judgment.
Mr. Crawford Brown, I'm not going to allow you to raise that question again. Let's get to the next question.
Mr. Manuel, your biographer Pippa Green, in her book Choice Not Fate, published in 2009 on page 47, quotes an unnamed senior Treasury official as saying, quote, "I don't think Trevor was willing to fight it all the way. He gave up essentially. It was a big defeat for Treasury, and I personally was very sad the way we got beaten there. Manuel backed off. Perhaps it was clear that Mbeki wanted to go through with it. Is that correct?"
Commissioners, I don't understand the relevance of the question. Perhaps if I understood it, I'd be able to respond. Thank you.
We'll come to the relevance in the question. The next question I want to point, a new book that's just come out by Professor Vicencio.
On which page are you, Mr. Clover Brown, of your questionnaire that you gave us?
It's a different set of questions.
Oh, it's not the ones that have been
No.
included.
I have a different set of questions from the ones that I had furnished to Advocate Mdumbi a week ago. You don't have a copy of these questions, but you...
It's on page 4, question number 17.
My set of questions is...
Thank you, Advocate Maulani. Thank you. It is number 17. Thank you.
Set of questions now, it's question number 16, sir. Question number 17, if I may, is that just recently you've said to Professor Charles Vicencio and Ms. Soko in their book, Conversations in Transition, maybe I should have gone further and fought all the way, but I did not. A collective decision had been taken, and as a member of Cabinet I felt an obligation to go along with it, whilst insisting that my officials in the Treasury and I remain squeaky clean in the process. The implication of that quote is that you would know better the next time. Is that correct?
This is speculation by Mr. Crawford Brown, and I will not respond to speculation. Thank you, Commissioner.
So this is a quotation from a book just published by a very respected academic in Cape Town. The point I want to make is we're already at the next time with Defence Review 2012. This is led by Rolf Meyer and Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, plus the same characters, Ron Haywood, Tony Ngeni, and Helmut Roma-Heitman, who led South Africa into arms deal number 1. The Defence Review 2012 is about to be introduced into the new Parliament. Now these same characters want to double military spending to 2% of GDP, or to about 80...
Mr. Brown, I'm going to stop you from that. May we get to the next question?
Sir, as Minister of Planning, he has remained silent and is therefore complicit in this abuse of the public.
Mr. Brown, I'm not going to allow that question. Let's get to the next question. The Defence Review of 2012 have got nothing to do with our mandate.
Sir, yesterday in your testimony you spoke at length about Section 198 of the Constitution, which covers the issue of national security, which says national security must reflect the resolve of South Africans and as individuals and as a nation to live as equals, to live in peace and harmony, to be free from fear and want to seek a better life. Now, Mr. Manuel, these principles reflect human security values of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which very notably the apartheid government had refused to sign. Our Constitution is unique in many ways, including this provision. These human security provisions are in marked contrast to traditional notions of military security, in which the state is kept perpetually on guard against threats of foreign attack. In a nutshell, what I put to you is that personal security issues of education, health, housing, job creation, and crime prevention take national security priority in terms of this section of the Constitution, and that in the circumstances of post-apartheid South Africa, human security priorities must override the insatiable demand of the military for shiny new toys for boys. Is that correct?
Chairperson, Commissioners, yesterday I detailed the record of public finance when the SDPP, at the highest point of its expenditure, was one of the smallest items, because we've always held a composite view of human security. In respect of Clause 198 of our Constitution, the matter referred to by Mr. Crawford Brown, it's important to note that it's located in Chapter 11, which deals with security services. That very provision creates an obligation on a democratically elected government to provide that responsibility. It's clearly a responsibility that we need to have also in relation to our neighbors in Africa. So I really don't know. If the insinuation by Mr. Crawford Brown is that we neglected to finance issues like education, healthcare, social security, etc., then I think I would like to go back to my evidence in chief yesterday, which referred to exactly what the expenditure levels have been consistently over the period. Thank you.
Mr. Manuel, as your memorandum of the 30th of June 1998 confirms, it was irrational and unconstitutional to prioritize military security over human security by blowing the budget on the warships and warplanes in the way that you did. It was way beyond what your department had considered to be affordable, and yet you were party to it.
I'm not going to allow that question. Let's get to the next question.
So Mr. Stein's testimony has confirmed that there was no rational reason to buy the BAE aircraft. I've provided this commission with 160 pages of affidavits from the British Serious Fraud Office and the Scorpions that detail how and why BAE laundered bribes of £115 million to secure the contracts, to whom those bribes were paid, and which bank accounts were credited. I put it to you, Mr. Manuel, that in signing these foreign loan agreements, which gave effect to the arms deal, you've failed in your constitutional obligations to the people of the country because you refused to investigate allegations that were rife in the 1980s about bribes being paid for these arms deal contracts.
So you're saying the 1980s?
1998. There were already allegations of corruption, that BAE was laundering bribes through Swedish trade unions and others. I got confirmation of these payments. I then, through contacts in London, asked the British government to investigate whether BAE was bribing our politicians. Scotland Yard was appointed to investigate. The answer eventually from Scotland Yard was it was not illegal in English law to bribe foreigners, and therefore there was no crime to investigate. That was 1998 to 1999.
Now, what is the question to Mr. Brown, to Mr. Manuel?
So is that Mr. Manuel, as Minister of Finance, given the extent of allegations of corruption, had an obligation to investigate and to assist investigating. Instead, with his cabinet colleagues, he deliberately and unlawfully impeded and blocked such investigations.
On what basis do you say that Mr. Manuel deliberately blocked the investigation?
So we've heard from lawyers for human rights about the investigation with SCOPA and the discussion with Mr. Feinstein. Mr. Feinstein has also confirmed the conversation he had with Mr. Manuel when Mr. Manuel was trying to get him to drop the investigation at SCOPA. This was just one of many instances where there was inappropriate interference to block and to impede the course of the rule of law.
Let's get to the next question, Mr. Brown. I'm not going to allow that question.
So in 2002, Ms. Ramos, on behalf of Mr. Manuel, had certified that the loan agreements he signed were self-standing loan agreements with binding force and not dependent on any other agreement entered into government. That statement is to be found on pages 410 and 411 of the documents that are in the bundle.
Chair, as I indicated earlier, Mr. Crawford Brown is trying to resuscitate through the platform of this commission the ECA matter which he lost. And it's clear from a reference to his bundle that is what he is dealing with. And I think that question and that line of questioning is improper.
Is that one of the issues that was dealt with in that matter that he instituted against Mr. Manuel and the other parties?
Yes, in fact, the pages he refers to, Commissioners, comes from his founding affidavit in that very matter that has been dealt with and for which he still owes taxpayers in this country many millions of rands.
Mr. Brown, I'm not going to allow the question. Let's get to the next question.
So the purpose of asking the question is that the answer by Ms. Ramos was illogical, and it was confirmed to be a perjury by the loan agreements signed by Mr. Manuel for the BAE Hawk and BAE Saab Gripen fighter aircraft. These are loan agreements funded by Barclays Bank, guaranteed by the British Export
Mr.
Credit
Brown,
Guarantee.
I'm not going to allow you to ask that question. Let's get to the next question if we still have other questions.
So Mr. Manuel's signature appears on that loan agreement, and which his
Mr. Brown, I'm warning you for the last time now. If I give a ruling, I expect you to respect it. I said to you that I'm not going to allow that question. Get to the next question if we do have another question.
Obviously, I have to skip most of my questions and the abuse of law that I've suffered from Mr. Manuel. But the point I want to make is the DTI document, the report, which is in your bundle, which found that the offsets were fraudulent. This is a final concession after 15 years from the Department of Trade and Industry that the offsets were fraudulent. Now, as we know, the whole arms deal was predicated on the basis that if we spent 30
Mr.
billion...
Brown, can you produce the evidence that the offset agreements were a fraud?
So it's in the bundle, pages... DTI has finally, earlier this year, and I furnished this document to you in pages 643 on. After 15 years, DTI's audit has finally...
Mr. Brown, just hold on, let's get hold of that document. You're saying, where's the document?
Pages 643 to 679. At the back of the bundle, sir.
Where does it say that these agreements are a fraud? Can you refer to a particular paragraph?
Not right at the moment, sir, but it is public knowledge and is included in this that instead of 110 billion rand in offsets, which as Advocate Abu Bakr told these hearings was the benchmark, we only received 6 billion rand in offsets. Therefore, the offset program, which motivated the arms deal, was fraudulent.
I'm not going to allow the question, Mr. Brown, unfortunately. Let's get to the next question.
Chair, we are rather concerned about the tenor of Mr. Crawford Brown's so-called cross-examination because he's making gratuitous and defamatory allegations against not only the witness but other people who are not before this commission. He's referring to perjury, is referring to fraud committed by these people, deliberate misstatement. And I think he should be warned that this commission cannot be used as a platform to defame people.
Mr. Brown, I think to a very great extent I agree with what Advocate Moirane said. In your questioning, you tend to make a lot of other allegations before you come to the question that you want to put to the witness. Can you please put questions to Mr. Manuel about what he testified? If you want to put another point, the question to him, please do it without making reference to any other person or derogatory remarks about people who are not before this commission.
So provision 1.6 of the Commission's terms of reference requires the Commission to investigate whether any contract concluded, pursuant to the procurement process, is tainted by fraud or corruption capable of proof, such as to justify its cancellation and the ramifications of such cancellation. So since you're not allowing me to proceed with my questions, I would like to refer to the legal opinion presented to the Commission 2 years ago as part of my submission to the Commission with a legal opinion by Advocate Jeff Budlander that the offsets and the system of the arms procurement failed Section 2171 of the Constitution. That submission was made in June 2012. It has still not been dealt with, but Advocate Budlander, in this legal opinion, which you'll find on pages 568 to...
Mr. Brown, that legal opinion, we are aware of it. We haven't reached a stage where we deal with legal opinion. We are dealing with evidence now. Mr. Manuel has given evidence before this commission. Do you still have any further questions to ask him? The question of legal opinions and legal argument will come at a much later stage, not at this stage.
Sir, since Mr. Manuel at great length has raised the issue of the consequences of cancellation, let me refer to the last paragraph of Advocate Budlander's opinion.
Mr. Brown, I'm warning you for the last time. The question of the legal opinion will come in at a much later stage. Mr. Manuel has given evidence. Do you still want to put any questions to him relating to his evidence and not to the legal opinion that you got from your counsel?
Sir, as DTI has already conceded, the offsets were fraudulent.
Mr. Brown, I'm warning you for the last time now. You say DTI has conceded that the offsets were fraudulent. Do you have that evidence? Can you refer us to that evidence?
DTI, sir.
It's a report. Can you tell me on which paragraph does that statement appear, which says that the offsets were fraudulent?
So lawyers for human rights have also, and you remember yesterday I had to furnish you with the umbrella agreement for the BAE contracts that you evidently had not yet seen. It seems extraordinary that we have to provide you with these documents and that you haven't read them.
Mr. Chairperson, maybe if I might came in, I'm sorry, Chairperson, Isaac Chue from the State Attorney on behalf of the DTI. Mr. Chairperson, I think Mr. Crawford Brown is missing the point. The intention of the internal audit was a self-introspection by the DTI in which it actually within itself advised about the NIP policies and where they might have some discrepancies. And it stated them out, not necessarily pointing them out as a fraud, but just certain corrective measures which they advise their own department to deal with. Actually, that DTI report is supposed to be congratulated other than to be referred to as a fraud. It's not a fraud at all, and there's no mention of fraud. And with due respect to what Advocate Abu Baker said, he never referred to the DTI's NIP policy as being a fraud or any kind of benefits. That, Mr. Chairperson, we do take an exception. As a commission places.
Mr. Brown, do you still have any relevant questions to Mr. Manuel?
I have one final point to make, sir.
Just hold on. Not a point. I don't want you to make any points. I'm trying to find out if you still have questions from Mr. Manuel.
I have one more question to put to Mr. Manuel.
Okay, you can do so.
Mr. Manuel, yesterday you spoke at great length about the consequences of cancellation of these loan agreements. The point I want to put to you is that fraud unravels everything, and that in cancelling the contracts, we would in fact regain some of our credit standing, which has been so severely compromised by the arms deal and the corruption that it unleashed. And therefore, after that, I have no further questions to put to you. We would, if we cancel these contracts, actually regain some of our standing in the international banking community.
Commissioners, the basis of the ECHA Crawford-Brown application was precisely this. It went to the Western Cape High Court. he lost with costs. He sought leave to appeal, it was dismissed. He went to the SCA, it was turned down. He petitioned the Constitutional Court, it was turned down. He then went to the Public Protector to report the Constitutional Court to the Public Protector. It was turned down. And then he went to the Constitutional Court to report the Public Protector for not taking him seriously. It's exactly the same issue that he reconjures time after time. The submission I made yesterday is that this matter is well and truly, like the dodo, now extinct. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
So unlike the dodo, the arms deal is not extinct. And
Mr. Brown, I haven't given you permission to talk. You are finished with your cross-examination. Thank you. Mr. Manuel, thanks a lot for testifying. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just reminded, Advocate Mpaha, to find out if Victoria you still have got any, if Victoria we want to re-examine, or Advocate Moiron.
Chair, we do not have any questions. Thank you.
Advocate Mpaha?
No further questions, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Manuel, thanks a lot for testifying. What is our next step now?
Chair, I think we...
I'm sorry. Wait, no. I thought somebody at the back wanted to talk. Oh, okay. If I'm not wrong, Advocate Mpaha, we are going to adjourn now, and our next sitting will be on a date to be announced in the coming 3 days or so.
I confirm, Chair, that we will then adjourn, and then we'll announce the next date in respect of the former President Mbeki. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We'll adjourn now.
Siyabonga. We're having an early day today. It's a dodo. It's a dead matter. It's a dodo. Yeah. Yeah, that's my line. I wish I was working for newspapers. SABC is too stuck up. They might not allow me to use that. Oh, asebenzile? Oh, ngibona ungathi umfuna ngapha. No man, basesekhona laba. Yabona bayacelebrate manje. Kanti today mayeza it's thirsty. We are thirsty man, please. Sipontolo ngisize ngifake lento. Ngwazi ukuzoma ku position. Oh, it's in 30 tape now. Yeah, but I see fuck, at least with the bambe. No, it's fine. But during live, we make
and there's nothing I can do.
Email, okay, now you don't say the la move, huh? Don't find out what is as mchelanga ukuthi sa cross. Mchelega yi. No ukuthi umcheleni. Kaningi.
Yabona makahambile uhambi.
Ebe kwatile. Lo sisi ngathi ayini kahle man. Lo sisi manje ngoba nenkinga la. Yeah. Uzongifuna kuphi today? Hello? Hi. Yeah. Huh? Oh, yes, Dave, how's it? Huh? Yes, Dave, I can hear you, my brother. Sharp. Hi, Natasha. I can hear you nice and clear. Lang me khona ngathi. Hey, letlapa engami bafowethu. Uhambile uTrevor. Uphumela? Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you for the water. This is our bribery. This is our bribery.
As they say, they say, what place about the Manuel? Yeah.